Hello, this video will discuss about the 11th house in Vedic astrology. In our earlier videos, we discussed about houses 1 through 10, and this video will be the 11th in the series. Now, the 11th house in Vedic astrology is called a Labha Bhava. Labha means income or gains. Bhava means house. So this is the house of gains. And of course, this is considered a Kama house, like we considered the 10th house as the Artha house. Artha means money. Kama means desire. So this is a Kama house, and it is, like I said, related to the desires. And the 11th house is going to give us an indication as to whether that individual will be able to fulfill his desires or not. Also, it will give an idea of what kind of desires that person actually has, and that's what we'll figure out based on the planets which are sitting in the 11th house and the lordship of the 11th house. Which planet is the lord of the 11th house? And since it's a Kama house or a house of gain, it is related to money, incomes, and anything material, and anything which is associated with possessions, desires, fulfillments. Now, some astrologers believe that almost all planets placed in the 11th house will give good results. However, there is a slight disagreement on that, because if you remember, Parashara or sage Parashara has classified the 11th house as an inauspicious house. So any association with the 11th house would be considered inauspicious. Also, sage Parashara clearly mentioned in his teachings that the lord of the 11th house will be a functional malefic for that ascendant. Now, there's a slight contradiction here. On one side, we say this is a house of gain, and this is a house of money, fulfillment of desires. And on the other side, sage Parashara very clearly says that the 11th house is not a good house. It is considered one of the malefic houses, and the lord of the 11th house is not good. And obviously, any association of any planet with the 11th house may not be good. And I'm saying may not be because different planets give different results when they relate to the 11th house. So the contradiction is, and a lot of scholars have done some research on that, and they have come to the conclusion that, well, thousands of years ago, making money, being very desirous of objects, fulfillment of desires, Kama, which is desires, was not considered to be a good, and it was not a sattvic trait. And therefore, the sages had described this house as a bad house, and the lord of this house is a bad planet for that ascendant. And association with the 11th house under certain conditions may not be good as per those sages. So this is what the scholars came to a conclusion. Now, this 11th house is also connected or associated with close friendships. So you can look at the 11th house of an individual, look at the lordship of the 11th house, look at the planets of that 11th house, or look at the planets which are sitting in the 11th house, and you can determine the kind of friends that person will be attracted to, or the kinds of friends which that person may have. And like I said, this is not just friends, but really friends which are close to that person's heart. Also, this house is also connected or will speak about the individual's elder siblings, just like we discussed about the third house. And the third house signification is, it talks about siblings and especially younger siblings. The 11th house will describe or will be associated with the person's elder siblings. So this talks about the 11th house and what 11th house actually represents. However, the sages have also made some comments in their teachings, and the teachings of sage Parashara, in which has been compiled in Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, talks about the effects of the 11th house as well. And what sage Parashara says, and it's again contradictory, because one side he says 11th is not a good house, and then again he's talking about gains. So he has talked about gains here, and he says, in case the 11th house lord be sitting in the 11th house itself, there will be a lot of gains. Similarly, if the 11th house lord is exalted, although it may be combust, still there will be a lot of gains. So very clearly sage Parashara has directly associated the 11th house with gains. Another combination which sage Parashara talks about related to the 11th house is that in case the 11th house lord is strong and it is sitting in the second house, and at the same time the second house lord is sitting in an angle house or a Kendra house along with Jupiter. So he says a strong 11th lord should be sitting in the second house, and the second house lord should be sitting in an angle or a Kendra house along with Jupiter. In that case, this combination promises extreme gains, a lot of gains. He also says that in case the 11th lord is sitting with a benefic in an angle house or a Kendra house, or in a trine or a Trikona house, once again it is an extremely good combination to acquire money and gains of money and material wealth. Another combination which sage Parashara mentions is that in case Jupiter, Mercury and Moon are sitting together in the 11th house from the 11th house. So sometimes you'll see, and as we go along our videos, you'll see that sometimes if the 5th house is not strong, the sages have talked about 5th from the 5th related to the 5th house. If the 11th house is not strong, or it's weak or strong, either ways, then the sages say look at that house from the 11th from the 11th, and that's what sage Parashara is talking about in this particular combination. He says again that in case Jupiter, Mercury and Moon are sitting in the 11th from the 11th, and that is, we know 11th from the 11th is the 9th house. So if Jupiter, Mercury and Moon are in the 9th house, which is, like I said, 11th from the 11th, the person will be very wealthy and he'll have a lot of money in terms of diamonds, jewels, so on and so forth. But again, rather than saying ninth house, he has said 11th from the 11th. Again, he has said that about another combination, that in case the 11th house lord is sitting in the ascendant and the ascendant lord is sitting in the 11th, so there is a parivartan yoga, meaning the lords exchange their position. 11th lord is sitting in the ascendant and ascendant lord is sitting in the 11th. Then again there will be large gains as per sage Parashara. And he has also mentioned about timing of those gains, as to what year of that individual will he have gains in certain combinations which he's mentioning. But we're not getting into that detail right now. We just know that the sage Parashara also has associated gains and extreme gains through the 11th house. Again, there's another combination he talks about. He says in case the 11th house lord is in the second and the second house lord is in the 11th. So again, this is a parivartan yoga, means exchange of houses. 11th house lord in the second house and the second house lord in the 11th. Then he says, sage Parashara says, that one will be extremely rich, but he has classified that. He said, well, he'll be rich, but he'll be rich after marriage in such a case. So that's a very interesting combination here. And another combination with sage Parashara says that in case the 11th house lord is sitting in the third house and the third house lord is sitting in the 11th house, another exchange of houses combination. 11th house lord sitting in the third house and the third house lord sitting in the 11th house. Then sage Parashara says that there will be immense gain through co-borns. And why is he saying co-borns? Because we know that the third house is related to the co-borns, and also the 11th house is also related to the co-borns. The only difference is the third house is related to younger siblings and 11th house is related to elder siblings. And he has said that in case these houses exchange their lords exchange their positions, then there will be immense gains through co-borns. And then again he says that in case the 11th house is debilitated, then there will be no gains, obviously, because the lord of the 11th house, which is the house of gains, is in a fall, or if it's debilitated, there won't be any gains. Also he says in case the 11th house lord is combust, again there will be no gains. So we have to make sure that when we look at a chart, we see, well, what is the position of the 11th house lord? Is it debilitated? Is it combust? Well, if it's debilitated, there's a red flag. If it's combust, there's a red flag. Also, in case the 11th house lord is sitting in one of the Dusthana houses, and the Dusthana houses are bad houses, which are also called the trick houses. They are the 6th house, 8th house and 12th house, along with the malefic. So sage Parashara says that in case the 11th house lord is sitting in these bad houses along with the malefic, and these bad houses are 6, 8 and 12, then again there will be no gains, in spite of the fact that the person may work extremely hard, but there will be no gains. So very clearly the sage Parashara has associated the 11th house with gains. He may not have mentioned a connection here with friends, as we have discussed earlier, that yes, 11th house is associated with friends as well. But yes, this ends our discussion today on the effects of the 11th house, and we will be taking up the 12th house in our next video. By the way, before I end, we know that the natural ruler of the 11th house is Saturn. So when we do an analysis of the 11th house, we have to see the position of Saturn as well. And why is the natural ruler of the 11th house Saturn? Because The 11th house represents the 11th zodiac, which is Aquarius, and the ruler of Aquarius is Saturn. So we have to see the position of Saturn as well when we study the 11th house and its effects related to that particular chart. So friends, we will be discussing about another topic, or actually we'll be discussing about the 12th house, which will be last in this series of houses in Vedic astrology in our next video. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.